The silence of the Colorado suburbs does not offer peace. It offers a vacuum, a hollow stillness that feels like a bated breath held too long. For Elias, a freelance graphic designer who lived his life in the flickering blue light glow of a dual-monitor setup, the world outside usually ended at his front door. He was a creature of the night shift, comfortable in the isolation of 3 a.m., where the only sounds were the hum of his computer's cooling fans and the occasional groan of the house settling into the frozen earth. But that comfort died on a Tuesday in mid-November, the air thick with the metallic scent of impending snow. At exactly 4:02 a.m., a soft, rhythmic vibration shuddered through the floorboards. It wasn't a sharp knock or the frantic ringing of a doorbell. It was the dull, heavy thud of something being placed with deliberate care on the wooden slats of his porch. Elias sat frozen, his fingers hovering over his keyboard. He wasn't expecting a package, and certainly not at an hour when even the bravest delivery drivers were long off the clock. When he finally gathered the courage to peer through the side light of the door, the porch was bathed in the sickly yellow glow of the street lamp, but it was empty. Only a small, nondescript cardboard box sat on the mat, wrapped in weathered twine that looked like it had been sitting in a damp basement for decades. There was no shipping label, no barcode, and no postal stamps. There was only a return address written in a shaky, erratic hand that made his stomach drop into a cold pit of dread. It was his own handwriting, and the address was his own front door. Inside the box, nestled in a bed of yellowed, moth-eaten cotton, lay a silver locket. Elias felt a jolt of electricity shoot up his spine. He hadn't seen this object since he was 8 years old. It was the locket his mother had worn every day until she passed, an heirloom he thought had been lost during a chaotic move across the country 20 years ago. With trembling fingers, he snapped it open. His mother's portrait was still there, but the image had been desecrated. Her eyes had been meticulously picked away with a needle, leaving 2 hollow, black craters that seemed to stare into his soul. A cold sweat broke across the back of his neck as he realized the impossibility of the situation. How could something lost 2 decades ago find its way back to him in the dead of night? The following Tuesday, the ritual repeated with agonizing precision. At exactly 4:02 a.m., the thud returned. This time, Elias was waiting behind the door, his hand on the deadbolt, but by the time he swung it open, the street was a ghost town. The second box was larger and smelled faintly of salt and decay. Inside was a single human molar. He took it to the bathroom mirror and opened his mouth, his heart hammering against his ribs. He saw the jagged chip on his own back tooth from a childhood bike accident, and then he looked back at the tooth in the box. It was an exact match down to the microscopic stains. But as he touched the cold enamel of the tooth in the box, a sickening sensation washed over him. It was as if a curtain had been drawn over a section of his brain. He tried to remember the bike accident, the smell of the asphalt, the face of the friend who had helped him up, but the memory was gone, replaced by a gray, static void. He wasn't just receiving items, he was being audited. Every delivery was a fragment of his past, a physical piece of his history, and as they returned to him, the memories associated with them were being extracted. The paranoia began to rot his daily life. Elias became a prisoner of the 4 a.m. window. He stopped working, stopped eating, and spent his hours staring at the high-definition security system he had installed to catch the phantom messenger. He waited for the third Tuesday with a kitchen knife gripped in his white-knuckled hand. On the monitor, the streetlights flickered and dimmed, casting long, distorted shadows across his lawn. Then, a figure stepped into the frame. It didn't walk onto the porch from the street. It seemed to materialize out of the darkness itself, a solidifying mass of shadow that took the shape of a man. Elias's breath hitched in a silent, suffocating scream. The intruder was wearing his favorite charcoal hoodie, the one with the bleach stain on the cuff, and the same worn-out sneakers Elias was wearing at that very moment. The figure moved with a haunting, mirrored precision, tilting its head at the exact same angle Elias was tilting his in the living room. When the entity turned toward the camera, Elias felt the world tilt on its axis. The face was not a face at all. It was a smooth, featureless slab of pale, translucent flesh, a blank canvas where a human identity should have been. It had no eyes, no nose, no mouth. Yet Elias felt a gaze that pinned him to his chair, a look of predatory recognition. The entity reached into its pocket, pulled out a small box, and placed it on the mat with that familiar, heavy thud. Then, it leaned toward the doorbell's microphone. The audio on the feed hissed with digital interference, a rasping sound like dry leaves skittering across a grave. The voice that came through the speakers was Elias's own voice, but played in reverse and stripped of all warmth. It whispered, "I'm almost whole, Elias. I just need the last piece." Driven by a frantic, animalistic instinct to protect the remnants of his soul, Elias bolted to the door. He threw the locks and lunged onto the porch, intending to tackle the doppelganger, to scream, to fight for his life. But the porch was empty. The cold mountain air hit his lungs. Yet there was no one in sight, no footsteps in the light dusting of snow, no car speeding away. Only the box remained. He tore it open with hands that no longer felt like his own. Inside was his own house key, the one currently hanging from his belt loop. He reached down to touch his hip, but his fingers met only empty air. He looked back through the open door at the security monitor in the living room and saw the unthinkable. He saw himself, the real Elias, standing on the porch on the screen, staring into the house with a look of utter confusion. But he wasn't standing on the porch anymore. He was inside the house, looking out. Or was he the one on the screen looking in? The boundaries of his own skin felt porous, melting into the shadows of the hallway as the house began to feel like a foreign, hostile landscape. The memories of his life were flickering out like a dying bulb. His first kiss, the name of his first pet, the sound of his father's laughter. All of it was being sucked into the boxes. He realized then that the packages weren't gifts or even threats. They were a trade. The entity was collecting the discarded pieces of a man to build a version of itself that was more real than the original. As the sun began to bleed a cold, gray light over the peaks of the Rockies, Elias sat on the floor of his kitchen, holding a hollow locket and a chipped tooth, unable to remember his own name or why he was crying. Outside, a man who looked exactly like him, carrying his keys and wearing his life like a well-fitted suit, walked down the driveway to start a day that no longer belonged to the shadow left behind. The transition was seamless. The neighbors saw Elias leave for coffee. His clients received emails in his tone and style. His social media updated with photos of a life being lived with newfound vigor. But deep in the crawl space of the house, or perhaps in the spaces between the digital signals of the security feed, the original Elias remained. A blank, featureless thing, waiting for a Tuesday that would never come again. It is a terrifying thought, to realize that we are only a collection of memories and belongings, and that in the dead of night someone or something might decide they can play the part of you much better than you ever could. If you're watching this in the quiet of your own home, take a moment. Look at the items on your shelves. The old watch, the childhood trophy, the photo in the hallway. Do you remember them clearly? Or are the edges of those memories starting to blur? And if you hear a thud on your porch tonight at 4:02 a.m., do yourself a favor. Don't check the camera. Don't open the door. Some deliveries are better left unclaimed. Thank you for wandering into the dark with me tonight. If this story sent a chill down your spine, please leave a like and share your own unsettling encounters in the comments below. I read every single one. Don't forget to subscribe to Mysterious Bleak Whispers for more tales that blur the line between reality and nightmare. Sleep well if you can.